I'm Roy Hallems. I was a government contractor in Iraq. I was kidnapped on November 1st, 2004, and held for 311 days. We were all thinking we're going to get in on the ground floor of Iraq and help rebuild the country. None of that ever happened.
We were having 30, 40 kidnappings a month. We get this report that an American in Mansour, that he had been taken hostage.
I look up and there's 4 guys with AK-47s pointed at me. And there was a shootout between the gang in the courtyard and security guards on the roof.
My aunt called me and she told me, "Carrie, your father has been taken hostage in Iraq."
And I thought, oh no, this is real.
The kidnapper said, "We're going to sell Roy Hallems to Al-Qaeda. He's a dead man."
They took me to a separate room and had me kneel down. They put the pistol in my mouth and told me they're going to kill me right then. I did 20 years in the Navy. After I got out of the Navy and moved to California, looking for jobs in that area, the jobs were kind of tight. I ended up taking a job in Saudi Arabia, working for Saudi Arabia Trading Construction Company. Having been in the Navy, part of my job had been U.S. government contracts. They dealt with U.S. government, U.S. military contracts. And they hired me to go up to Baghdad to help them bid on these contracts and complete these contracts. At the time I went into Iraq, people were thinking the war was over.
In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
Reconstruction was going to start. Companies from all over the world were coming into Iraq. When I went into Iraq, no one in my family actually knew I was there. They all thought I was still in Saudi Arabia. I didn't tell my family because I didn't want to upset them, because I knew they were crazy about me being in Saudi Arabia, and they really wouldn't like it if I went to Iraq.
When I was a teenager and my dad went to live in Saudi Arabia, it hit me really hard.
We knew we'd have the strain of separation, for 11 months a year, but we just thought it was the way to go as far as financially.
I was thinking this would be my last big job because it was a good salary, and that would set me up for my retirement. We were all thinking we're going to get in on the ground floor of Iraq and help rebuild the country. None of that ever happened. Reconstruction started to fall apart. The violence just kept getting worse and worse between the gangs and the different clans and families in Iraq. They were all fighting each other and fighting the government and fighting the U.S. It was just chaos everywhere.
My name is Dan O'Shea. I was the coordinator of the hostage working group at the American Embassy in Iraq from 2004 to 2006. The start of the kidnapping crisis was April of 2004. There was already a trained kidnapping class within the ranks of Iraqi intelligence community. So the grounds were fertile for a kidnapping explosion. And kidnapping is, very part and parcel how Muslim extremist groups will, raise money, spread terror, and the rest. So that's why Iraq and the kidnapping crisis became such a catastrophic impact on everything we were trying to do in Iraq when we were trying to bring security, stability, and democracy to the region. And ultimately led to a number of contractors and soldiers getting killed. Matt Maupin, a soldier that was taken hostage, and a truck driver named Thomas Hamill. Within 2 to 3 weeks of his capture, Matt Maupin was killed. The insurgency wanted to send a message, and they filmed an execution video, a very grainy execution video of Matt Maupin. And then a week later, you had the Nick Berg kidnapping, and then later the beheading. And all of a sudden, the insurgency realized how effective this tool would be. this kidnapping tool, and the insurgency used that to discredit our mission, to raise awareness, to raise money to fund the insurgency, and ultimately tear apart everything we were trying to take the country toward.
When all of this started happening, of course, it made people more conscious of what was going on and to watch their surroundings and to be aware of it. I mean, we knew it was risky. We knew things were going on, but we always thought, well, we're being cautious and we can avoid any of these big problems. It was November. I was sitting in my office doing some work on items that were coming up from the U.S. Embassy. I had a 9mm pistol laying next to the computer just for safety reasons. I'm looking at the screen. I see some movement just to my left. I look up and there's 4 guys come through the door and they have AK-47s pointed at me. One of them says, "You come with us or we'll kill you." The Iraqi police had always told us, if you ever get in a hostage situation, always shoot it out. So I thought, I can reach over, pick up that pistol, and I can kill one of these guys right now. But I knew as soon as I did, the other 3 are going to kill me right now. So I decided I'm not going to die right this second. They take me downstairs, they lay me on the floor, put my hands behind my back, tie them with nylon zip ties. I was just in there by myself, so I thought. But then I heard somebody else moving, and I moved around where I could see back toward the wall behind me, and I recognized that Robert Torangoy was laying there tied up also. Robert Torangoy was a accountant. He was Filipino who worked for the company.
So ako nasa baba ng opisina ko sa table ko sa ground floor. Nagtaka na lang ako, paglingon ko, mayroon ng tao na nakamask at nakatutok yung baril sa ulo ko. Paglingon ko, bigla na lang akong sinapak dito ng hawak-hawak niya na baril at pagkatapos dito sa may tiyan ko hanggang nawalan ako ng malay.
They pushed me into the courtyard and I hear gunshots. There was a shootout between the gang in the courtyard and security guards on the roof. One of the kidnappers climbed up to the roof and guards turned around and killed him. When this gang member was killed, he had a cell phone on him, and that became a key part of the story. They put me in the back of a 4-door Toyota. One of the gang members, he puts his left arm around my neck and he hits me in the head with a pistol 3 or 4 times and says, "If you move, I'll kill you." And we take off. We arrived at a house. 2 or 3 of them were hitting me with their fists. Maybe they thought I was going to try to get up, but my hands were tied behind my back. There wasn't much I could do. They were telling me, "Lay there, be quiet, or we're going to kill you." I didn't think I was going to live very long. I was hoping that they would just make it quick, whatever it was. And that's when you start with all the what-if questions. What's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to the house? When the gang members left, I heard some moaning and some movement, and maybe 5 feet away I could see Robert Torangoy laying on the floor.
So nung nasa loob kami ng bahay, kasi naka-masking tape naman, packaging tape naman yung mata ko at saka bibig, so wala na akong makita at hindi ako makasalita. torture ang dinaranas ko. So hindi talaga ako nagsasalita hanggang sumapit yung...
It was, I guess, a little comfort to know that he was there. I was sorry he was in the situation I was in, but at least I knew there was two of us. Thought they were going to kill me. I was just hoping it would be time for my family to get used to the idea that I was kidnapped, because I didn't think I was going to live very long at all.
So November 1st, 2004, all of a sudden we get this report that an American in Mansour, that he had been taken hostage. There had been a gun battle on the street. A couple of guards had been killed. I think one of the kidnappers were killed, and all of a sudden this American was now missing.
When I found out, it was early November. The phone rings and my daughter, Carrie, is screaming like I've never heard before.
When the State Department called me and told me my dad had been taken hostage, I didn't believe them. I was in total denial.
I thought Roy was working in Saudi Arabia. I didn't know that, he had taken a job in Iraq. He took the job and didn't tell us because he didn't want us to worry. I had a knock at the door, and I could tell it was the FBI, and so I asked them to come in, and they said, Roy Hallams has been kidnapped in Iraq, and it was horrible. And I thought, oh no, this is real. This is real.
There's two sides of the kidnapping. There is the jihadi kidnapping that's going to generally end up in a beheading, or it's going to be a kidnapping for business, because kidnapping ultimately around the world is a business. It's about raising money, ransoms, or extortion, extorting concessions.
In 2004 and 2005, Abu Musab Zarqawi had taken the leadership in Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and his brand of Al-Qaeda was very, very violent.
I was afraid it was one of the political gangs like Zarqawi who would be involved with, a beheading on video. I knew there were kidnap gangs who operated for money also, but I didn't know what kind of gang had me, because nobody in that group spoke very good English, and I don't speak Arabic. So we're tied up, hands and feet. You don't say anything. There were always threats of, if you do anything, we're going to kill you. Be quiet or we're going to kill you. The first few days, it's like you think you're in a dream or Twilight Zone or something. It's like this can't really be happening. And then after a while, you come to realize, no, this is for real. From day to day or hour to hour, you didn't know what they were going to do, because mainly they didn't know what they were going to do. And these guys could really kill me anytime they feel like it.
I remember calling the FBI and saying, it's been days and you haven't given me any information. And they were like, oh, this is going to take longer than that.
The FBI contacted us and told us not to tell anyone that my dad was a hostage.
I didn't really know what to do. I was told to be silent, but I'm a fixer. I try to fix things. It was my mission to figure out how I could help him, because I knew he needed help. The FBI said they had no information, so when I got a call from Roy's company, I had to talk to them. I had to know.
The first 5 or 6 weeks I was held, we were moved every Friday. We'd be put in a car, driven around for 2 or 3 hours, and then we would end up at another house, and we would be at that house for a week, and then the next Friday we'd move the same way. So that went on for 5 or 6 weeks. I was blindfolded. I didn't know where we were. I had the blindfold on like 23 and a half hours a day. The only time they'd take it off was when they take us to the bathroom. One day they took me to a separate room and had me kneel down on the floor. Somebody sat down beside me on the left, another guy on the right. Turns out the guy on the right spoke some English. He tells me the man on my left is the sheikh, which is the head of the family, head of the gang. And he said they were going to ask me some questions, and if I lied to them, they were going to kill me right then. He would hit me in the head with the pistol. He was wanting to know the phone number for my daughters, which I knew was bad news, and I told him I didn't know the number. They didn't believe me. They put the pistol in my mouth and told me if I didn't give them that phone number, they were going to kill me right then. Eventually, the sheikh told me that they were going to call U.S. Embassy and they were going to get $12 million as ransom for me. I told the translator, well, no, the U.S. doesn't pay ransom. The U.S. Embassy is not going to do that. And then he said, we're going to call your family. I said, my family doesn't have $12 million. If I had $12 million, I wouldn't be in Iraq. When I said that, the sheikh hit me in the head with a pistol and said, shut up. At least I know I've got a gang who's interested in money, so they're probably not going to kill me today. But how upset is the sheikh going to be when he finally figures out he's not going to get paid $12 million?
From November to December, wala silang ibang ginawa kundi paghahampasin ako ng AK-47 kahit saang party ng katawan ko. Siguro mga 100 times akong nakaranas ng hampas ng mga armas nila.
They would beat you and hit you with these pistols, which, you know, they almost knocked me out 2 or 3 times. And they would beat you with their fists, or they had belts. They would beat you with the belts. But I was always worried one of these idiots could screw up and actually kill me. And the sheikh would be mad for a week, but I'd be dead.
At the time Roy was kidnapped, he was working for a Saudi Arabian company who was contracting, and they were, willing to pay $5 million, but the ransom was $12 million. So they asked me, what could I do? And could I match them? And I told him, no way. I mean, I don't have it. The weight of the world was on my shoulders. I didn't know where to turn or what to do. I would have done anything to help save him.
The average American thinks that the U.S. policy is, we don't talk to kidnappers. Well, that's not true. The U.S. policy was we don't make concessions to terrorism, and we don't make concessions to kidnapping groups. But in reality, we want to talk to them, because if we talk to them, we may be able to find them and then launch a raid or launch a rescue. Roy was kidnapped with a Filipino, and that Filipino, Robert Tarangoy, the kidnappers were talking to the Filipinos, and they were trying to negotiate a ransom settlement. And it opened up a door for us to establish a channel. The guy on the phone was negotiating with the kidnapper ring. They said, well, we want to talk money. He said, well, I don't have the authority to talk about money. Kidnapper said, why am I talking to you? Hung up the phone. The next call didn't go much better. The kidnapper said, well, we'll get our money. We're going to sell Roy Helm to Al-Qaeda. He's a dead man.
Then what do? Well, the answer to that is you do things like work the intelligence, try and determine where this person is, trying to determine who's holding them, build the network, and try and get to the point where you can rescue this person or negotiate that person out of their situation. Now, when you're talking about terrorist hostage takings, it's a little different. It's more of the intelligence, gather the intelligence, try and determine where this person is, and try and set up for the potential for a rescue. The day that Roy Helms was taken hostage in Baghdad, there was evidence that was collected from that scene. A deceased hostage taker, the firearms that were recovered from the bad guys, bullets and shell casings, and a phone.
That telephone, it had phone numbers in it that could be tracked. One night, we were moved to another farmhouse around Mahmudia. It was dark, As we got in the corner of the room, I could see there was a hole in the floor. And in Iraq, they don't build basements. But what the gang had done is dug a little room under the floor of the living room of this little farmhouse. They lowered us down into that little room. There was nothing there. 4 concrete walls and a concrete floor.
Although piniringan nila ako, pero parang madilim yung, parang ginawa lang talaga yung underground na yun na para pagtaguan nila ng mga tao. Pinahiga nila ako kaagad. At saka nakaganon pa yung kamay ko sa likod.
Robert and I spent our first night in that little room just in total black. As it turns out, I spent the next 8.5 months in that little room.
A lot of time had passed and I didn't feel like the FBI really knew anything or was doing anything. They were telling me it was stagnant and that they didn't know anything.
When it comes to reality and it doesn't feel like anybody's searching for him and you don't get any information at all, I was ashamed to say that I lost hope, because you're never supposed to lose hope.
Our hearts were broken and, the worry, just worrying about would he be okay? Would he be able to come home?
We had no idea even who had him. There was not a direct claim of responsibility by an Al-Qaeda group, and there was some loosely named group, but at that point we just kept assuming we're just going to see a proof of life video of Roy down the road.
Robert and I had been in a little farmhouse under the floor. I guess it had been about 10 days. We hadn't had a bath in 3 months, no ventilation, and you're not getting very much water or food. The best thing you could do is just try to lay still, not move around too much, and waste your energy, and try to just stay cool. The construction of this farmhouse was so bad the rain would drip down through the floor above, and if you're sleeping and the drops of water will hit you in the face. And sand fleas are a big problem, and they would get down into the room, and then you would have sand flea bites, but your hands are tied, so you can't scratch them, you can't do anything, because you can't reach them. That was just something you dealt with on a day-by-day basis. One time they opened the door up, took us out. They told me to sit down. One of the gang members said, "We're going to take your picture today." He said, "I want you to take this piece of paper and put it in your heart." He meant memorize it. It has on it what they're wanting me to say. I was thinking, well, they're going to do a video. He said, "I will come back in 15 minutes and then we'll take your picture."
I'm an American national, and I have been arrested by a resistance group in Iraq. I'm please asking for help because my life is in danger.
We're finished with the hostage video. Then that video was actually put out by the gang like the middle of January, but that was the first proof that I was actually alive.
It was early in the morning and I got a call from my daughter Carrie, and she said, "Mom, turn on the TV. Turn on the TV now." And I did.
American hostage Roy Hallam's pleaded for his life in a new video released today.
And there was Roy with a AK-47 to his head, and I was like, oh my God. I thought he might be killed right then. I could tell he was very nervous, and he mentions that he needs help.
I asked my family to help because my health is in a very bad situation.
All of a sudden, seeing this proof of life video was the first, like, okay, he's alive. Because at that point, most Western hostages were generally kidnapped. They might have one proof of life video, maybe two, and then generally it was an execution. Case goes cold on Roy, but still, we have all these cases happening every day. There was a French journalist, Florence Abanas. She goes interviews a sheikh at a mosque at Baghdad University, and we hear moments later she's been kidnapped.
Florence Abinas, a correspondent for the French newspaper Libération, has been missing since January.
One day, Robert and I are in the little room under the floor. One of the gang members comes in, and he told us something was going to happen that night, and he put cotton in our ears, and he put cotton over our eyes, and then he got some masking tape, wrapped it around our ears and our eyes, and he said, tonight, you know, you don't hear anything, you don't see anything, you don't say anything. They brought in Florence and her translator. They told us, don't talk or we'll kill you. Late at night, I might scoot over closer to where she was, ask her how she was doing, and ask her questions about how she got kidnapped and what they were doing. After Florence and her translator came in, they brought in a new group of hostages, 3 Romanians. The Romanians were news reporters who had been in Iraq to interview some people, and they ended up getting kidnapped by the gang who had me, and they were brought and put in that little room with the rest of us. The only time we could see anything is when they brought food. The gang would turn on a little light bulb, 5 or 10 watt light bulb. They would raise the door, and one of the guards would come down, usually have a big tray. The guard would scoop out the rice and a piece of meat and hand it to each person. That was it. I was getting weaker every month.
After the proof of life video, for months we had nothing on Roy Helms. We then were dealing with, a French kidnapping, Romanian kidnapping, a number of other cases that had popped up. We still maintain a relationship with the Filipinos who were trying to negotiate a release for Robert Tarangoy. And ultimately, a French journalist, Florence Abanas, was released after the French government paid a multi-million-dollar ransom.
French journalist Florence Abinas and her Iraqi translator Hussein Hanoun were freed after 5 months.
And in the debriefs, it turns out that she was held with an American named Roy. Another week goes by, and the Romanians were released. Their debriefs came back and said, we were held with an American named Roy. By now we knew we were tracking the same kidnapping ring, held all in the same place.
I could never sleep. It was exhausting and so hard to talk about. And I had called every important person I could think of, down from the Archbishop of Canterbury to Schwarzenegger to the Clintons to Dianne Feinstein, and it just seemed like somebody influential that could help me. I wanted to see him come back alive.
We felt desperate and decided to go public.
Please release him. He's a kind and wonderful person.
Maybe he'll be found because of the publicity that's being brought to the case by us. Just hope that they find it in their hearts to release him so he can come back home.
As time and months went on, different hostages got released. And it got down to where it was just Robert and I. They came in and took Robert out of the room. And that was it. I never saw him again.
They removed me from the tomb. So kinuha nila ako. Yun nga, dinala ko sa taas, kinuha yung piring ko. So nakita ko yung mga bagong pinakita sa akin, yung sabi nila new clues daw. Nung umpisa hindi pa ako makakita kasi nga yung sa piring ko, hanggang unti-unting may nakita akong liwanag pero hindi pa ganun ka talagang clear. At narinig ko yung sinabi nila na sa dasal nilang Bismillah Al-Haram Al-Harim. So dalawang ang iniisip mo lang noon. Kasi pwede kang palayain o pwede kang pugutan ng ulo. Then pinasakay ako sa sasakyan. Wala akong makita. Sabi nung kidnapper sa akin na dito sa may tenga ko, sabi niya, don't move. Nung mga ilang minuto, mga 10 to 15 minutes, biglang may dumating na tao. Sinabihan ako dito na, my friend, you will go home.
For months, we had nothing on Roy Helms, and we just assumed we're going to eventually maybe get a beheading video somewhere, but we just assumed Roy was dead. And all of a sudden, after months of negotiation, the Filipinos paid out a ransom, and Robert Tarangoy was released.
You know, when you're the first one there, everybody's come in, their ransoms get paid. I mean, you're glad that they get out of that situation. And you're sad that you're still in that situation with no end in sight. I could be here for years, or they might kill me tomorrow.
When Robert was released, the FBI said, oh, we're going to put you in touch with him so he can give you information. And one night, it was really late, Robert called me and he was whispering because they had told him that they would chop his family into little pieces if he ever gave any information. He said, well, Roy's still alive, but he's in really bad shape and you have to do something like now. You need to call everybody you can and keep doing what you're doing because he's really in a horrible condition.
And we had a debrief, and the first question was, when was the last time you saw Roy Helms alive? And he said, last night. And we said, oh my God, Roy's alive.
The last months, they were hell. One day, they brought in a new hostage, an American Iraqi, Mohammed. The gang was getting nervous because the U.S. Army was operating in the area around Mahmudiyah. So they said instead of opening that door in the floor every day, they were going to start bringing in food every 3 days. The first time they did it, when they went out, we started hearing this scratching noise on the floor above. I said to the guy that was with me, what is that? And he said, oh, sounds like they're putting concrete over that door. They're sealing that door. We're sealed in here. They might get scared and just go to Baghdad and never come back. We had no way to dig out through a concrete floor. We would end up dying down in that hole, starved to death. You know, that would just be our tomb.
I just felt like we weren't getting anywhere. So, you know, there was no other choice. Like, it's this or he dies. You know, way too much time had passed. I kept going, I prayed, and I just kept believing because I was told he was probably had been killed. But I kept believing. I just felt like all things were possible if you believe in something. And I believed in this so much that he was alive, and this, I had no other choice. I had to do this. There wasn't another option.
you're on the outside of probability that something bad didn't happen to you. Just dying from treatment, not a beheading, but just, you're not like in a Ritz, right? And people aren't really taking care of you. So there's a potential that you could just die. In mid-August, a young Navy officer came up to us and said they had this piece of intelligence that had been run up the chain before and hadn't really come to anything, but he wanted to run it again. You find a phone. You're going to try and get as much intelligence out of this electronic device. And if you are able to determine the phone number of which this phone comes from, then you can do all sorts of, hey, was this phone number ever, used by people in criminal activity, in hostage taking, or in terrorism, and all those kinds of things.
The FBI would run the phone numbers to see if they could find out if anybody was talking about American hostage. They started getting hits on gang members that had actually said something about an American hostage.
Early September, a subject was brought to our location that potentially had information related to hostage-taking networks. And so using all that background information that Hostage Working Group and our interviews had put together, we went in to do the interview of this person that had been brought forward to us. The way that we're trained in interview interrogation is to try and build rapport with this person. A couple hours into this, you start bringing out pictures of hostages, Roy Hallam's being one of them. You're showing the photographs, starting to humanize the hostage as a person. At some point, probably 4 or 5 hours into this, he took one of the photographs and slid it forward. And then he said to a FBI linguist, "Tell this man I'm going to tell him something I've told no one else." He said, "Here's where the house is." He said, "When you go to the house, you're not going to be able to find them. You're going to have to move a freezer. You're going to have to lift up a rug. And then you're going to have to chisel out this piece of cement, lift the piece of cement out. The hostages are underneath the house."
Many times, we may know of a location, but because it's not 100% intelligence verified, many times they will not launch. But in Roy's situation, it was critical because the gentleman that knew exactly where Roy was being held, he got rolled up.
This was the freshest, most actionable intelligence we've had in a period of time. And because the detail of the information, I believed him. I believed that he was telling me the truth. So that's huge. And we have a location.
They turned around immediately and launched on the intelligence.
The military put teams together, put up helicopters, and went downrange.
Had they waited a day or two, Roy could have been moved around and they would have lost this lead. So they launched on the daylight raid.
Around 11:30, I was getting ready to have my second can of sardines, and I heard some helicopters. And it wasn't unusual to hear helicopters. This time, the helicopters were getting louder, louder. And at the end, it sounded like they were landing on top of the house, which they practically were. I heard a lot of yelling, a lot of running, and then I heard some pounding on the little door to the room, which was my ceiling. Sounded like a sledgehammer to me. Eventually, the door just completely fell in. This soldier jumps down in the room and he points at me. He says, "Are you Roy?" And I said, "Yes." He yells back up the stairs, "Jackpot." You're just shocked, like, well, this can't actually be happening. And when I go upstairs, I see these U.S. Army Special Forces guys walking around. They were all smiling. They gave me a flag and we had to wait about 20 minutes for the helicopters to circle around so we could go meet them in a field that was next to the house. When we were taking off, one of the guys on the helicopter said, "Do you want the doors open or closed?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to have the doors open. I've had the doors closed a long time." They flew me to Balad Air Force Base. Saw the doctor. He checked me over and said, "You're not healthy, but you're healthy enough to make it back to Memphis. They can take care of you there." FBI had a satellite phone, so I called Carrie first.
In the middle of the night, the phone was ringing, and I answered, and as soon as I put the phone up to my ear, I heard my dad's voice. And in that moment was just glorious, because I didn't even know if I would ever have that moment again with him.
The night Roy returned home, and he started telling me about all the time that he had been held. And it was just the most amazing story I'd ever heard in my life, of all the will he had to live and keep going and not give up. And he thanked me that I helped save him.
To me, on the inside, I haven't changed that much. But that's not my whole life. That's just a piece of my life. You know, my life's in the future. So that's where I'm headed. The kidnapping was just one story in a long life. I learned later in the time period that I was in Iraq that 440 foreigners were kidnapped, and 24 of those were Americans. 18 of those 24 are known to be dead. Only one person was rescued, and that was me.